I thought I'd go through the apps and technology that I use from a fitness and workout standpoint. First of all, everything, well, I try to put everything I can. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I can't get everything up there. But if you're curious, the kind of data that I'm collecting on my own workouts, I do post all of that, and I try to make it in a format that is easy to navigate and stuff like that. It's kind of just kind of a little personal web page kind of thing. I will link to it in the notes. When I originally was weightlifting and working out back as a teenager, I didn't track anything. I think it was less common to track everything. For one thing, phones, like smartphones, weren't a thing yet. And there was a lot less to remember and think about in life. I mean, I was younger. There was just less to be on my mind. So it was relatively easy to go to the gym and remember, my maybe 10 to 15 core exercises that I did and just remember the weights that I was at. That wasn't difficult at the time. And also I was just getting started. I didn't, the people I was going with weren't tracking anything, so it just wasn't kind of a natural thing. When I came back into working out and weightlifting, I started with just a pen and paper. And I would just write down, the sets, the weights, the reps, all that kind of stuff, the basic stuff. And then any notes that I wanted to remember for the next time. And it worked fine, but it was another thing to carry around and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, there's a line, right? You don't want to go into the gym and just sit on your phone and just you don't want the technology to get in the way. However, if you use the technology well, it can be a real benefit as long as it's not something that then distracts you. So anyway, I use a few things. I try to keep it kind of minimal, but this is a big piece of my life. So I do try to, I have found some tools that really work for me. So I'll start with the core of it all, or what to me is the core of it all. If I had to pick just one thing, I would probably choose this. For my actual weightlifting, my actual workouts, I use an app called Strong, and I'll link to all this stuff in the notes. I use an app called Strong. I do pay the subscription on this. This is it has like a yearly cost. I forget exactly how much it is. I want to say it's like $30 or $50. I don't remember, but it's a yearly cost, and I just pay for the year. It has a big bank of exercises, and you can add your own if there's things that, aren't in there. And it just lets you track your weights, your reps, all that kind of stuff. And it keeps track of certain things like personal records, personal bests, that kind of stuff as you go. It gives you some stats, but I don't really use it for the stats. They really aren't that in-depth or great. It kind of shows you some trend lines, but they're kind of useless to me. It's more about just the core tracking and the core. If I then want to go back to an exercise sometime later, I don't have to go dig through notebooks to try to find it. The other thing it has is a data export where you can export all your data as a CSV. It's not the best CSV in the world, but it was good enough where I can export it and use it to feed, again, the sort of website that I keep with all this information. So that's the core workout app. Now, after that, and it works the way that I think about my workouts. I should mention that. It does have support for things like supersets and warm-up sets and things like that. It just works the way that my brain sort of thinks about working out. It's not perfect, but it's like 95% of the way there. And so that's been a very good app for me. Now, the next piece is the Apple Watch. And I didn't have it at first, but maybe, a bunch of years ago, I did get one. And I like it. It links up with the Strong app, and it does so pretty well. So as you're working out, if you don't have an Apple Watch, the watch, it tracks sort of three main stats. It tracks sort of your quote unquote, what they call the move energy. But the idea is it's trying to separate out the calories that you burn throughout the day just by existing versus the calories that are actually from actively doing something, whether that's moving around, walking, working out, going for a run, like whatever. So the Strong app links up with the watch and it does its best. And the watch then is able to count your workouts as active energy, which I find to be useful. Now, the Apple Watch is far... If you're using an Apple Watch and thinking that the numbers are accurate, you're probably going down a bad road. They are not. It's all an estimate, and it's all based on, technology that's, maybe it's 80% accurate, something like that. But 20% when you're talking about calories burned, thousands of calories burned in a day, week, month, 80% isn't all that great, but whatever. What I like it for is not knowing the exact number of calories I spent or whatever on a workout. What I like to see is the relation to other ones. So what I find it very useful for is if, let's say on a Monday, you close all your rings and it tells you that you burned 800 active calories that day. Then the next day you don't close your rings and it says you only burned 600 calories in the day or whatever. It gives you some indication that you were more active on Monday than Tuesday. And I do find that to be useful. I do find it to be useful to know at the end, because on Mondays, you get kind of a summary where it's like, here's how many times you beat whatever metrics you set for yourself, and here's what your active calories looks like. And I find it really useful to be able to say like, oh, Monday I did real well. Tuesday, Wednesday weren't, I didn't quite hit my marks. Wednesday, Thursday, I did well. Oh, I remember that day I went for a run, or that day I did a swim or whatever. Like, it gives you some indication that you can track over time of what you've been doing in relation to other days. In other words, I don't care about the actual numbers it presents. I care more about, is the bar higher or lower than the day before? That's sort of how I think about it. The other thing I like about the Apple Watch is that while Strong is great for tracking workouts, the Apple Watch is pretty good for tracking everything else. So if you go for a walk, if you swim, if you run, if you bicycle, any of that kind of stuff is great for on the Apple Watch. It will track it, give you some idea of the calories. And there's a whole bunch of data there that I'll talk about in a second, which I also have found a mechanism by which you can export that. And I feed it into this website that I keep for like all my fitness data. So I've got Strong that I can export workout data, like weightlifting data. I've got Apple Watch that I can export basically everything else data. The third piece in sort of my main trio, is weight tracking, like body weight tracking. I use an app called Happy Scale. Now, I bought this app like the lifetime whatever, early adopter membership or something, way back when I think it had just come out not long before. Today, I'm not sure how... It is a paid app. You can use parts of it for free and there are parts that are paid. I'm not sure if it's a subscription model these days or if you can still do a one-time purchase for a lifetime or what. But as far as weight tracking goes, I really like this app. You can set different goals. Are you trying to gain weight, lose weight, maintain weight? Do you want to maintain weight within what range? And then it gives you a bunch of options for tracking your weight. And what I like to use is, what is my moving average weight, right? So I don't care if I weigh in one day and I'm 180 and the next day I'm 181 and the next day I'm 179. I don't tell myself, oh, you lost 2 pounds or you lost a pound or you gained a pound or whatever. I want to see when you mathematically smooth all that out, is my trend going up or down, right? Or staying the same. And that's what this app does really well. Plus the visuals are nice. The interface is nice. And it also integrates, all of these things integrate with the core Apple Health and Apple Fitness in the background. So all this data works together. Like, I'll enter my weight actually into Strong, my body weight, and then that feeds back into, I forget if it's Apple Health or Apple Fitness, I think it's Apple Health. And then that feeds Happy Scale. So Happy Scale gets the updates that I put into Strong, and then I can see the visualizations and the tracking from Happy Scale. And once again, it has a data export feature. So I'm able to export it and put it up on this site that I like to put all my information together on. So that's my trio. My main trio is the Strong app, Apple Watch, and Happy Scale. Now, couple kind of ancillary things or things that are more on the fringe. As I mentioned, to get the data out of Apple Health is not easy. But I did find an app that does this pretty well. So if you're trying to, and again, most people probably aren't even trying to do this, but for me, pulling the data out is just as important as getting the data in. So I found an app called Auto Export, which can do a whole bunch of stuff. One of which is to export all the health data. So I'm able to pull the health data out and then run some stuff on it in order to massage it into a format that I like. So that's an ancillary piece that I use. Another ancillary piece. So anyway, another ancillary piece I'll talk about in a second. But again, my use case here is I want to put all my data in. Then I want to be able to pull it all out and massage it into a way that I like it. And then I try to post everything up on my on this website. So, and then that's a way that I kind of track things over time and see, just see years of progress. And I can also show it to other people too, if they're ever interested in seeing like, oh, what workouts are you doing right now? That kind of stuff. So I do all of that. The pieces that I would like, and again, there'll be a link to that website in the notes. There's a couple of things I would like to expand upon on the site. One piece is I'd really like to start, and this is one of the things I haven't built this yet, but I want to show summary data. So I'd like to be able to say like, oh, pick a year like 2024. What was your most common, like what was the lift you did the most times? How many times did you run that year? How many times did you go, how many times did you lift weights that year? Like just some summary data, some averages, stuff like that. So I could see that. I just haven't spent the time to build that yet. The other piece that I would really like up on that site is my nutrition data. Now there's two barriers to this. One, I tried tracking my nutrition data for a while, and I just found it really tedious. So that's like a personal thing. Like I just haven't found the motivation, I suppose, to really see that through. I'm able to increase and decrease and bulk and cut really without having to track it at such a tedious level. I've just never needed to do that. I have found ways to do it in other ways, I suppose. So it didn't really stick for me. But the other reason, but I was doing it. And the reason I was doing tracking for a while, and I think I tracked for a good 4 or 5 months, really for the first time ever. What I wanted to do with it was pull all that data out and get it onto this site. So you could see like, oh, I worked out like this day. I did a run this day. I did a swim this day. And here's my nutrition for the day. That's what I wanted on the site. I was using an app called Macro Factor, which I've talked about in this show before. I really liked it. It was pretty good. It had an export feature for the data, but when I went to export the data, it only gave me summary data. It would say, oh, you had this many calories, this much protein, this much fat, this many carbs. I wanted to see the actual foods I ate in that export, but it didn't exist in that export. And I reached out to the developer and they told me, oh, due to like their partnerships with these food companies, or whatever, or the database companies that do the food, they're not allowed to export that data, which was a bummer to me. So I don't know. I might try some other app for this and see if they're able to export the actual food data. That's what's more interesting to me. I don't really care about posting, oh, I, had 200 grams of protein or whatever. I wanted to be able to show, oh, 200 grams of protein and here's where it came from. So that people asked me for like, oh, what do you eat on a daily basis? I could show them. That was much more interesting to me. So once I found out the app couldn't export what I wanted it to, and it was tedious to begin with, it just kind of fell off for me. So that's what happened with that. But that is a thing I would still love to do on the site. So if anybody knows of a macro tracking, a nutrition tracking app that does do exports of the individual like foods and meals you eat, I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to take a look at that. But anyway, that's sort of my suite of things. I'll have links to all this in the notes. Again, I kind of have this trio of Strong App, Happy Scale, and my Apple Watch. That's my core. And then I have a couple of these other things that kind of sit around it. And most of that stuff, though, is really just so that I can then pull the information out. So hope this was useful to someone. If you're looking for an app that does one of these things or whatever, I recommend these things. This trio has worked very well for me over time. I've been using it for, 5-6 years. And I don't find a lot of shortcomings with it. It does what I need it to do. It stays out of the way, and it's a benefit. So give it a whirl. Hope that's helpful to somebody.